I like to always learn a little bit about my audiences before I start, so I'd like you first to let me know where you are geographically located, city and state in the United States, city and country outside the United States, and we like to use the question window for answers as well as for questions, so if you could post that in the question window, I would really appreciate it. All right, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Houston, Texas, Mumbai, India, Dubai, UAE, Ahmedabad, New Delhi, LA, California, neighbor. Okay, New York, Calgary, New York City, UAE, Houston, Texas, India, Philadelphia, Bangalore, Nigeria. Welcome. New York, London, New York, Bogota, Colombia. How many continents do we have now? I think 5 so far. Anybody in Europe? I didn't see Europe yet. Bangalore, Berkeley, Calcutta, India. India. We don't have Europe represented. Interesting. Cambridge, UK is still Europe, definitely. Even after Brexit. I didn't see London, though. Okay, but anywhere in the UK is definitely still Europe. Philadelphia, maybe they're all at work. In Europe, they're actually after work. San Diego, Hyderabad. Anybody else want to share where they're located? Okay, but good representation, definitely an international crowd. No, now I see London, UK. Yes, you're right. Okay. Next thing I want to know is where you're located in terms of the application process. And I'm going to launch a poll for that. You should see it on your screen momentarily. There you go. Please indicate which best describes where you're at in the application process. You applied round 1 and will apply to more schools round 2. You applying round 2 and round 3 of this year, or you're preparing for next year or later. Let's see, we have 72% having voted. Can we get it over 80%? 5, 4, 3, come on, 2, 1. Okay, with 86% having voted, we have a great audience here today. Here are the results. So it's 14% applied round 1 and will apply more round 2. 49% applying round 2 and round 3 of this year, and 37% planning ahead for next year or later. That's fantastic. Okay, very good. All right. Now, just a little heads up, I'm going to be giving away free copies of MBA Missions for Smarties, which is a book that I co-authored with accepted consultant Judy Gruen. I'm going to be giving them away in part of a contest at the end of the webinar, so pay attention because how well you listen will determine whether you have a chance to win or not. The other thing I want to mention, how many of you, just curious here, how many of you have downloaded the worksheet we sent out? Raise your hands if you have. That means click on the hand icon. Don't wave it in front of the monitor, please. It won't do any good. Raise your hands if you have downloaded the worksheet. Okay, a good number. Okay, thank you. About 40%. Fantastic. For those of you who have not downloaded the worksheet, it's in your handout. I would encourage you, if possible, to download it and print it out. It's a great place for you to take notes and I think get more value from today's webinar. Just a freebie. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I think it will be helpful to you. Okay. Now, I got a call earlier this month from someone. Let's call him Joe. And Joe wanted an MBA, and he only wanted to attend a few elite programs. That's all fine and good. We work mostly with applicants to top MBA programs. He wanted my opinion as to his chances and how we could help him, and he said, please be honest. Don't worry about hurting my feelings. I assured him I would be honest. I think it's a waste of both our times if I'm anything but. Now, he had a very specific and solid post-MBA goal. He had a somewhat lower than average GPA for his target schools. He hadn't yet taken the GMAT, but he assumed a 700 would be good enough for where he was applying. He did have really impressive work experience, and he also was very determined to start his MBA program this upcoming September. He did not want to have to reapply. He didn't want to risk rejection and reapplication, and he did not want to go to a lower-ranked school. We talked, and I explained to him that for schools he was aiming for, he really needs a higher than 700 GMAT. At first he was a little defensive, and he said, you mean I won't get in? And I said, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you have some strengths and you have some weaknesses. You need to be cognizant of those weaknesses and address them head-on, as well as highlight your strengths throughout the application. We talked some more, and by the end of the call, he was very appreciative of my advice and my candor, and he promised that he'd get back to me after his GMAT. I realized that in this call, like hundreds of others, if not thousands of others, I've had in my 20 years as an admissions consultant, the real question is, how can this individual, the one I'm talking to at the moment, and all of you here today, how can you make B schools love you? How can you get in? And I've developed a 5-part framework that you can use as a plan or roadmap for your application process. And I know it's a grueling, demanding process, and a process that most of you would prefer to go through exactly one time. Now, I went through it myself years ago, and also I've been through it thousands of times with clients over the past 20 years. And I know that following this plan will help you get into the best schools for you and ultimately pursue the dream career that is the whole reason you want an MBA. So for the rest of this webinar, I'm going to walk you through this plan and also issue a few caveats and warnings about rabbit holes that you really don't want to go down in the process. So the first warning, oh, here's Joe. I forgot to show you a picture of Joe. There he is that you're not going to get in by waving a magic wand. A dab of makeup won't do it. Even spin won't do it. You have to submit a substantive, compelling application. And that means you need competitive qualifications and effective presentation of those qualifications. Your overriding aim is to show that you belong in whatever program you are applying to. Because if you do show that you belong, they will love you. Now, let's dive into the nitty-gritty. And I want to ask you, and I'd ask you to reply in the question window, how do you show you belong at whatever school you're applying to? That you shouldn't end up in the reject pile. How are you going to do that? Give me some suggestions as to how you're going to do that. In the question window, please. Show that I'm a good fit. Okay. Research the school. That's a good start. Understand the culture and show that your actions are a fit. Good. Visit the school. Those are all good starts. Valuing what they value. Very good. Alumni support. Less effective than you might think. Show a clear path post-MBA. Definitely important, Mency. Adding value to others as well. I assume it's to you. Abhinav, good. Talk about how the program helps you achieve your goals. Good, Ahmed. Discuss the specific piece of the program that you can contribute to. That can definitely be helpful, Sonal. Your personality, problem-solving style, and values will demonstrate your fit for the program. Good, Jack. That's definitely part of it. By make clear of my interest and make sure of a match in values. Good, Anand. Understand your strengths and weaknesses. Good, Kingsley. Talk to the adcoms to understand what the uniqueness about the program is. That's good, provided that you're not asking them questions that are answered by the website. They actually get really irritated at that. Brianna, showing how your passion is aligned with the program's mission. Good. Showing your achievements in your profession. Good. You're all hitting on elements of my 4-part plan. Again, this is a really good audience. You're all hitting on elements of my plan. What I'm going to try and convince you of, though, is that these elements are definitely important and they're part of it, but you have to do all 5 elements in order to get accepted at a top business school program. So let's move into the 5 parts, okay? Number 1, you want to demonstrate that you can do the work and excel. Now, how do you intend to do so? The easiest way is through your undergraduate transcript and your test score. Those are going to be the elements that most commonly show you can do the work or don't show you can do the work. Yes, and I found it very interesting that I don't think any of you mentioned GMAT or grades in your responses. Everything you mentioned is definitely important, but this part is also important. And what I sometimes find is that applicants who have the high test scores and the high grades don't focus on the things that you folks were mentioning in your response to my question. And sometimes applicants who don't have the high grades or the high test scores focus on the things that you were mentioning in your responses to my question. You need both. showing that you can do the work is absolutely foundational to an acceptance, to a successful application effort. So what does that mean? It means you want to be at or above the averages for accepted students, ideally for both grades and test scores. If not, how can you make schools love you with below average grades to start with? Well, let's realize that averages are what they are because people get in with below average numbers. Not everybody is above average across the board. However, you also need to realize that the farther away you are below the average, and if both your grades and test scores are below average, the less likely it is that you can effectively demonstrate you can do the work. So if your grades are a little bit below average, and a difference of 0.4 is actually quite significant, and it is a major hurdle, what you're seeing on the screen. What you can do if you have a little bit below averages, or perhaps there were extenuating circumstances that contributed to the low GPA, is you can take business-related courses and earn A's in them if you have a problematic GPA. You could consider taking something like HBX Core, which you can learn about at accepted.com/175. You can consider certificates like the CFA. You may also want to listen to accepted.com/137, where I addressed in detail how to overcome a low GPA. If your quant skills are weak, if you're the proverbial poet, but your grades are good, consider something like mbamath.com or HBX Core or quant courses at a local college. And by that I specifically recommend Stats for Business, Calculus if you have the prereqs, Economics, Accounting 1, courses like that that are related to business that will definitely improve your skills before you arrive on campus, which can be tremendously helpful, and also show the schools that you are improving these skills, developing these intellectual muscles. MOOCs are also an idea. Now, if your grades are below average, a high test score can mitigate, no question. For the top 10, you ideally want to be at the 80th percentile in both quant and verbal. That's not a rigid rule or requirement. I just want to make that really clear. It's not a line in the sand. If you're in the 70th percentiles, that's fine for the top schools. If you're getting much below that, it's gonna raise some eyebrows. If you're not sure about your grades, you may want to consider a retake. We have a couple of resources that can help you determine whether a retake is worthwhile. The first is a webinar that I gave a few months ago. Second is a blog post that obviously is a little bit more succinct, doesn't go into as much depth. And by the way, we'll be sending out these URLs, so you don't have to worry about copying them down. Just look for the email from us after the webinar. And it's in any case, your academic ability is generally evident in your transcript and test scores, the objective elements of the application. Now, getting back to our good friend Joe, remember, he couldn't really make this case. His grades were a little bit below average for his target programs. The GMAT score that he thought was okay wasn't really okay for the schools he was aiming for, which all his target schools had average GMAT scores north of 725, and his favorite was 730 something. So he really had to focus on that GMAT score and get it up above where he thought he was going to end up. Do you have any questions at this point? We're going to have definitely questions at the end, but I did want to take a few at this point. Do you have any questions on the importance of grades and GMAT score? Yes. Okay, Jack, go ahead. Type into the question window. Okay, is it okay to have a score in the 80th percentile, or should I look at the school's average instead? Again, in terms of the 80th percentile, I would look more at the 80th percentile for the quant and the verbal. You want both to be, and then that's an ideal. I'm not saying that if you're 75th percentile, you have to automatically retake. This is an ideal. And it's also looked at in the context of your grades and your work experience and everything else. But that's definitely a comfort level. And in terms of the overall score, I would look much more at the school's overall average. Okay, thank you, Nellie. And Jack's question is it valuable to register for a local college quant course even if you haven't completed it? I would say it is valuable on a couple of levels. One, if you are waitlisted, you can talk about the grades you're getting in that course. And two, if you're rejected, you'll already have completed the course by the time you reapply. And three, if your quant skills are weak and you have the course, presumably you'll be that better off when you arrive on campus. You don't really want to get there and start struggling with stuff that you could have and should have learned now. So I would say that that's a good idea in either case if you have concerns about your quant skills. And let's see, we're actually getting a lot of questions. If I don't get to them now, don't worry. I will get to them later. Let's see. Take one more now, and then we'll look at them later, okay? Anand asks, to what extent can GMAT scores realistically substitute for low grades? You know, that I can't give you a quantity, and it depends on a lot of factors. One, how long ago did you graduate? Two, how low were the grades? Three, how high is the GMAT score? How competitive is the school? What have you done since then, professionally and non-professionally? So I can't give you a rule of thumb. I can tell you that the lower the grades, the farther away it is from the average, the harder it is. If there was perhaps a graduate degree subsequently where you did really well, that's also a factor. So, you know, there's a lot of things that go into that. For more on this particular topic, I did a whole podcast called 5 A's for your low GPA. It's at accepted.com/137, audio only, so you can listen to it while commuting if you want, and you can go to that after the webinar and, again, discuss that a lot. I'm going to go on with the webinar, and we'll get back to some of these questions hopefully at the end. Okay? So number one was show that you can do the work and excel. That's the first key, and again, it's foundational for any application. Number two, have a clear, realistic idea why you want an MBA from this school and how you intend to use it. And many of you, when I asked my opening question, had that as one of the things you're going to show, and you were 100% right. Now, getting back to my good friend Joe, he did have a clear goal, and that was one of his strengths in the application process. So what is a MBA, post-MBA goal? Well, in MBA-dom, especially in admissions office, it means that you know the function you want to go into and the industry in which you want to work. And this is not the same as I want to study. I want to study marketing, I want to study finance. That's not a post-MBA goal. A post-MBA goal is also not, I want to be a consultant or an investment banker. That means you don't know what you want to do. That's basically telegraphing to them that you haven't a clue what you want to do. One more time, a post-MBA goal means I want to do X in industry Y. It's a function plus industry. Some of you want to tell me what your post-MBA goals are, and I'll comment on them. Again, in the question window. Some schools may also ask about long-term goals, which can be a little bit fuzzier and show options, and they may include a greater vision, or what Cindy Tokamitsu likes to call goals plus. And that's all fine. But let's see what you have here. Okay, all right, consulting in technology media space. Very good, Abhinav. Product management. Vishal, that's good. I'd like to see in what industry? Energy consulting. Okay. Nonprofit consultant. Good. Strategy for New York City hospitals. Very specific, Tracy. Excellent. Biotechnology. Okay. You want to do product management in biotechnology, research, you know, work for the World Bank or UN long-term after doing consulting or banking. Good, Nathan. Consultant at Bain in the Digital Strategy Division. If you are currently at Bain, that's fine as your goal because you're basically going back, and I assume you can go back. If you're not currently at Bain, I would say strategy, marketing in a digital strategy division, and not be quite that specific. Financial consultant in professional firms such as Boston Consulting Group or the Big Four is good. I want to be an investment analyst in a bank or consulting firm. Good, Nellie. Is management consulting at one of the top 3 MBB clear? Yes, that's very clear. If you had a particular industry focus, that you might want to mention that, but yeah, that's pretty clear. Brand management for CPG company that utilizes consumer research. Excellent, Emily. Very good. All right, you guys are pretty clear, general. Consulting and telecommunications, brand management in healthcare and pharma. Excellent, Sarah. Very good. Now again, we have a really good audience today. Okay, let's move on. For many schools, a clear goal is as much a requirement of admissions as work experience. For example, Chicago has a criteria career, and its 2 sub-criteria are sense of personal direction and realistic expectations for the MBA. The business school should be able to connect where you've been and what you want to do with the school's program, career strengths, and extracurricular opportunities, serving as the bridge between the two. The MBA is a connector. Again, what you're really aiming for here isn't the MBA experience as an end in itself. It is a means to an end, and that's the career you want to pursue for the next 30, 35, 40 years after you get the degree. And this clarity of purpose should come out in your essays, your letter of recommendation, your resume, and your interviews. It should just suffuse that. Yes, most schools have a question asking what you want to do, but it's not just about that question. Everything in the application should show that what you've done in the past, plus the education you receive at this particular school, really, really leads to your post-MBA goal. That's number 2. Number 1, show you can do the work in Excel. Number 2, have a clear goal that requires this particular MBA. Number 3, show that you share the school's values. Now, you folks, I thought you'd been reading my notes when I was seeing your answer to my first question, or else you've been reading my stuff. This is important to schools. If you want to study marketing, any business school teaches you marketing. Any business school teaches you the basics of finance, the basics of business. That's what they all teach. But why do you want to go to a particular one? Well, that relates to the values and the criteria of a particular school. So what does Harvard look for? What does it value? It's very clear. It values a habit of leadership, a capacity for intellectual growth, and engaged community citizenship. That's what you need to show in your application. Stanford has all over its website, change lives, change organizations, change the world. Guess what? You need to show that you have been a change agent, that you have made a difference in your social relationships and to the organizations that you've been a part of. If you want to get into Stanford and you've been a fly on the wall, it's not going to do anything. You have to show that you've been a change agent. Haas is very clear. It has its 4 defining principles. Question the status quo, confidence without attitude, students always, and beyond yourself. That's what it wants to see in your application, and it's being really clear about it. Most schools are really clear about it. INSEAD also has its 4 criteria. These are the qualities you have to show. Now, there's an enormous difference between mouthing platitudes, spitting back the phrases I've just given you, and showing that you share the values. The former, the spit back, is just putting lipstick on a pig. And frankly, you know what? It's just kind of ugly. It's not pretty at all. But examples in your essays, bullet points in your resume, items in your activity and job histories, the way your recommenders write about you and the specifics that they bring to bear, your responses to interview questions, these must all demonstrate these qualities. Now, what I'd like you to do is take your worksheet or a computer file or whatever you want and write down for yourself some ways in which you would demonstrate the qualities that your target program's values. Think about them, okay? Think about it for a minute, and then write down some of the things that you're going to take advantage that would help you show fit at your particular target programs. If you aren't sure what your target programs value, well, first of all, look it up when you get off the webinar. Second of all, why don't you just use Stanford's Change Lives, Change Organizations, Change the World for this little exercise. And write this down for yourself. This is not for me. I want you to feel like you've started something during this hour that we're spending together. Now, I'm asking, what is Columbia Business School looking for? Columbia Business School is looking for somebody that's going to take advantage of the access it offers. It's very proud of its location at the center of business. So you have to show that you've taken advantage of opportunities in the past. That's really important to it. It's also very proud of its community. So you need to show that you've contributed to your community in the past, as are most business schools. Okay. All right, Jack is asking a really interesting question. Many schools, Stanford is an example, show they want people who will change the world. I want to show I'm able to execute my goals, but I don't want to handicap my vision. Is there a practical way to reconcile this? Well, I'm not sure I can answer that question, in a few seconds on this webinar. But realize also, when you talk about changing the world, if you changed an organization or a department or a team, you have changed the world. The world is not the same. So don't think about changing the world in terms of cures for cancer, ending global hunger, ensuring pure water for everybody throughout the world. Think about much smaller ways that you have affected and contributed to your world. That's number one. And if that change that you have affected in the past also relates to your vision for the future, you have a clear path forward. Okay. Yes, Ahmed, there will be a recording. Okay, let's go on. Somebody's asking about Wharton. I do have webinars for Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Chicago, and I'm preparing a webinar for INSEAD where I'm going to go into the school specifics in much greater detail. But the existing webinars are Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Columbia, and Chicago, right? And you can look that up on the website after the webinar is over. All right, so you don't have to spit back phrases at all. Another thing that frequently obscures the fit aspect of admissions is the rankings, those evil rankings. If you focus on the rankings, you're not going to be focusing on the right thing. It's important to school. You're going to be focusing on all the other things that lots and lots of other applicants are focusing on. What you should be focusing on, and again, this group seems appropriately focused on fit. And demonstrating that fit to the individual schools. So schools have lots and lots of applicants, especially the top ones. The acceptance rates are hovering around 20% or less. In the case of Stanford, as I'm sure most of you know, it's 6%. Harvard, it's right around 10 or 11%. Don't focus on the rankings. You can layer in the rankings at the end of your decision-making process. Joe, getting back to good old Joe, he was so focused on rankings that he didn't know any of the schools' stated values. He couldn't discuss it with me. You need to know them in order to both choose the most appropriate schools for you and also convince them to accept you. So, again, this point of fit, which, again, most of you got it, it's really, really important. So, again, just to review, you want to demonstrate you can do the work. You want to have a clear goal that requires the education provided by that individual school. You want to be able to demonstrate fit with that school's criteria and values. And number 4, you want to demonstrate that you'll be able to contribute to class discussions and teamwork, the school's community, and ultimately make the school proud. Up until now, I've really been talking about fitting in, right? That's show you can do the work, the goal that they can help you achieve, and of course fit with value and criteria. This one is entirely different. This is showing how you stand out from the applicant pool. Now, show that you can make a difference. And the next slide is past behavior predicts future behavior. In the question window, please, how do these two slides relate to each other? What do they have to do with each other? What does it mean to you? Sarvesh, yes, it also does focus on location. Any idea? Anybody have an idea? Why are these two slides next to each other. Let's see. If you made a difference in the past, you can make a difference in the future. Exactly. Nefe, I apologize to anybody whose name I mispronounce. No, the difference does not have to do with future goals. Exactly. Mehul, you've been a change in the past. Right. Right. But I think Nefe put it best. If you made a difference in the past, you can make a difference in the future. That's exactly it. And that's what you have to show. You have to reveal a habit of contribution through your entire application, your essays, your resume, the activity history, the interview, letters of recommendation. If you contributed in the past, if you made a difference in the past, if you made an impact in the past, schools have reason to believe you'll do so as a member of their community and as an alumnus. So that's a major part of that. Do you have the work experience, quantitatively and qualitatively, that will allow you to contribute to class discussions? And in terms of quantity, 3 to 8 years is fine. I would say the sweet spot is maybe 4 or 5, 4 to 6 years. So that's kind of the substance of it. Do you have in your background this habit of contribution, this history of contribution? Do you have the work experience that will allow you to contribute to class discussions and also to have an easier time getting a job post-MBA? And then there's how do you present your experience in such a way that it helps you stand out? And I don't mean in a goofy way or trying to be overly clever. I mean that if you focus on specifics, you will automatically stand out. And that's something that you also need to do. Ultimately, the application is about showing that you fit in at a given school and stand out in the applicant pool. So some questions the schools ask almost help you show this standout quality. For instance, Duke has its 25 random things. Who are you? Columbia has CBS Matters. You know, NYU Stern has its personal expression. Chicago's question is all about standing out. So there's definitely, the schools are giving you opportunities to almost geared specifically to the standout quality, but it's not just about, you don't have to have swam across the English Channel, climbed Mount Everest, or found that cure for cancer. That would be great if you did. Let me just show you a little bit what I'm talking about here. How many of you work in finance or consulting? Please raise your hands if you do. Raise your hand if you work in finance or consulting. Okay. And how many of you, let me put your hands down now, how many of you have volunteered in any capacity in college or since? Okay, oh, got a very active group here. Okay. I'm going to put your hands down now. And how many of you have traveled for work or pleasure outside your home country? Anybody else? Travel outside your home country, work or pleasure? Raise your hand if you have. Okay. All right. Now, different set of questions. How many of you, let's see, let me think of a project. How many of you worked on software for the Apple iPhone? Okay. How many of you, let me think of a good one here. Hold on a minute. Volunteer for Engineers Without Borders. Okay. And I'll give you the results in just one second. And how many of you have gone trekking in New Zealand? Okay. All right. So here are the results. Thank you very much. 38% of you work in finance or consulting, 62% of you have volunteered in some capacity, and 66% of you have traveled outside your home country. 1% of you have worked on software for Apple, 2% of you have participated in Engineers Without Borders, and 1% of you went trekking in New Zealand. What's the difference between the first set of questions and the second set of questions? In the question window, please. Right, and what happened? Right, you're saying specificity, right. The second set are very specific. And what happens when you're specific? Uniqueness, exactly. Second group, you stand out, exactly. You all are getting it. Great audience. More comments, your individuals stand out. So the implication from this little experiment is that if you write in specifics, you are automatically going to stand out and distinguish yourself. And that's part of what you need to do. Don't write about volunteering in general. Write about what you specifically did. Are you an engineer or a transportation engineer or an environmental engineer or a chip design engineer? Those are all different kinds of engineers, and you're distinguishing yourself from the mass of engineers. Are you a financial analyst? Or are you a financial analyst in healthcare, in whatever industry it happens to be? Be specific, and you will automatically contribute to your own individuality and standing out in the applicant pool. Now, why am I making such a big deal of standing out? Well, let's listen to none other than Derek Bolton, former Assistant Dean and Director of MBA Admissions at Stanford Graduate School of Business. In a GMAC article several years ago, he wrote about admissions as a two-step process. The first one is evaluation, determining the qualified. The qualified are those who fit. And selection, crafting a class, determining which candidates to admit among those evaluated as highly qualified. Now, they want to create this rich educational environment, and they want a diversity of background, talent, and experience. So on some level, your task as an applicant, I know I've said this before and I'll say it again, is to show you fit in and stand out. And by standing out, I don't mean you have to be goofy. I don't mean you have to try and be somebody you're not. You have to be yourself, because you're the only one who is yourself. The implication from the selection part of the process is that the schools have no reason to admit someone without something distinctive to contribute or someone lacking a history of past impact and contribution. So that's number 4. Number 5, and number 5 overlaps somewhat with number 3, and that is reveal the personality traits that B schools as a whole value. And I would include among them leadership, teamwork, initiative, integrity. These traits should come out through in your stories you tell in your essays, the examples you provided by your recommenders, the answers you give to questions in your interviews. Now, the one that is across the board absolutely critical is leadership. Again, other traits that are valued: innovativeness, teamwork, analytical ability, initiative, global perspective, curiosity. Some schools will emphasize more, some specific ones more than others, but leadership is across the board, and all these are valued to a greater or lesser extent. So in selecting the examples in your essays and interviews, choose those examples, experiences, and anecdotes that answer the question, reveal these traits as well as the ones that the schools are most interested in, the individual schools are most interested in. And again, there is definitely overlap between my number 3 and my number 5, but I did want to bring this out. And this also comes through in letters of recommendation and the resume. Now, let's go back to your goal in submitting an application. You want to show that you belong in the program. And here we're going to have a little bit of fun. Again, I promised a contest, okay? So, and there's a picture of my book, the one I co-authored with Judy Gruen. The first 3 people to answer the next question get a copy of MBA Admission for Smarties. It'll be the Kindle version if you're located outside the United States. In the United States, paperback or Kindle, your choice. So here's the question. Please answer it in one one window. Don't hit enter in the middle. What is the first thing that will make B schools love you? Okay. Tala, you got it? Nathan, you got it? And I guess Brianna, you're close enough. Okay, so Tala, thank you. And Nathan, you got it. And let's see. Brianna, you're close enough. You know what? I'll also give it to Sarah. Sarah, there you go. Do you have it, Rachel? Okay. All right. There we go. Good. Okay, so let me go over it. The first one, the foundational element of any application is showing that you can do the work, right? And excel. You need to present the academic credentials that show you can thrive in a demanding academic environment. 2, you want to have a clear, realistic idea why you want an MBA from this school and how you intend to use it. 3, you want to show that you share the school's values and meet its criteria. 4, demonstrate that you'll be able to contribute to class discussions and teamwork, the school's community, and ultimately make the school proud. 5, reveal the personality traits that B schools value: leadership, teamwork, initiative, integrity. And these were the steps that I was recommending to Joe when I spoke to him. And of course, these are the steps that I'm recommending to you. You're welcome, Brianna. Final word of advice from me. The admissions committee, there's all 5 of them. The admissions committee readers are sharp, intelligent professionals. Don't try to craft, to fake, or to fool. The best presentation of you is an authentic reflection of your achievements and dreams, keeping in mind the 5 things that will make B schools love you. Now, the expert consultants at Accepted want to help you apply successfully, avoid rejection, and get started sooner on that dream career. We want you to apply with the confidence that comes from working with a seasoned professional who understands how hard it is to apply effectively and has helped clients go through this process hundreds of times in the past. We want to show you how you can show that you both fit in and stand out through your essays, your resume, videos, interviews, the whole enchilada, the whole application. Now, I started this webinar with a story of Joe, whom I advised in a brief preliminary call. He was thrilled to have found a mentor to guide him through the process. However, I would also like to share the story of Sally, who hired Accepted to work with her. Now, Sally was an athlete who had played top women's college sports and even turned pro. And while that experience gave her great discipline, teamwork, and leadership experience, it did not allow her to earn above average grades. It also wasn't classic business experience. And somehow her GMAT was below the 80th percentile level for the top program she was applying to. And in this case, I don't mean the 80th percentile overall for scores. I mean the middle 80th percentile for her target programs. In other words, it was under 20th percentile for her target programs. However, she worked with an Accepted consultant who helped her demonstrate she could do the in-class work, portray her strengths, and show fit. She got into one of the elite MBA programs and is headed to a career that many of you would give your eye teeth for. Now, we'd love to help you as we help Sally. Yes, I've given you a plan here today, but how are you going to apply the advice to your specific situation? Which are the best schools for you? Which is the best way to address your weaknesses and highlight your strengths? How are you going to show that you both fit in and stand out? If you would like an experienced professional to help you achieve your professional dreams, get Accepted. Explore our services. You can start with a small investment of a 1-hour consultation or decide you want a comprehensive assistant with multiple applications and just about anything in between. The cost of exploring our services and seeing what we offer is exactly $0. Check us out. And remember, the magic of individual consulting is helping you convince the schools that you and it are a perfect match. And today, as you can see, if you want to just try us out, either 1 hour of advising, 1 hour of editing, Our minimum fee is $305 per hour. You get $100 off MBA Love. You can get it for $205. That is absolutely the lowest rate. Now you can only do it on one time, and only today, but it's one way to try us out. For those of you not ready to engage, again, the coupon code is MBA Love. This is available today, December 7th, 2016, and you have the URL, and we'll be sending this out after the webinar is over. For those of you not yet ready to engage with a consultant, please take advantage of these low-cost or free resources. The first is MBA Mission for Smarties. It's available on Amazon throughout the world. It's available on Flipkart in India, and it's very inexpensive. The other two resources are free. MBA Admissions 101 is a gateway page, tons of resources, articles, videos, webinars, podcasts, you name it, on getting started in the MBA application process for those of you aiming more to next year, and there was a significant percentage of those. And for those of you in the thick of things, filling out applications, we have advice on essays, resume, I think even videos, diversity over representation in you, preparing for interview, it's all there. Or if you want 26 great tips, download MBA Admissions A to Z. And again, it's a free download. And now I'd like to take your questions. Let's see. Did you work any? Did you work any questions? Okay. Let me see what we got here. Oh, yes. Okay. I also want to, we have a couple of consultants here today. I want to unmute them. I want to introduce Karen Ash, accepted consultant Karen Ash, and Esmeralda Cardinal, who's also an accepted consultant. They're going to assist me in answering the questions. Karen and Esmeralda, you want to say hi?
Hi.
Hello. Okay, all right, there's Esmeralda. Okay, so let's see what we have here. Let's see. Hold on a minute. Okay, Nefe asks, do you have any recommendations for courses to go to practice quant skills before arrival? Esmeralda, do you have any?
I usually recommend my clients to take statistics, maybe 1 or 2 courses on economics. That always help. Some of the ones, if you are not really into quantitative, you've never taken any quantitative courses, sometimes accounting helps as well, and calculus. So usually the 4 ones that are typically the ones that would help the best. And I would say if your grades were not so high, particularly if your GPA was lower than the average of the school, you want to get solid A's in all 4 to demonstrate that you could do the work.
Exactly. Karen, do you want to add anything?
No, that's good.
Okay. I would also suggest just if, especially if your grades were overall good and you really just want to improve those quant skills, or maybe your quant score wasn't so III on the GMAT, then you might want to consider MBAmath.com, or I mentioned HBX Core. MOOCs are also a possibility, but the quality of MOOCs is a little bit more suspect, let's put it that way, as well as the commitment to them. So those are some options. Let's see what else we have here. Okay. How do schools view a large spread between quant and verbal scores? 54th percentile in quant, 96th percentile in verbal, engineering degree with GPA slightly below school's average. Karen, do you want to take that one?
Well, I think it will depend on what your goal is and what area of business you want to enter. But that verbal score, that quant score, is one that you, I think, would want to raise if you want to get into some of the best schools. And using some of the methods Linda just iterated in the last question would help.
Right. Esmeralda, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, what I would say is that if you said that the person had an engineering background, right?
Yeah, and I think he said it was a 3.3
Yeah,
GPA, if I recall. At least
yeah.
that's the question.
The schools will be wondering why the quant was so low because, obviously, you would have been able to do much higher. I mean, usually engineers have the opposite problem. So although it's wonderful that your verbal was so high, they will be wondering what happened with the quant. So I would definitely try to raise it because they will feel that they're excuses really, especially if your GPA is below the average, then you definitely want to retake.
Right. If you think you can do better, you're always better off retaking. They take the highest score. There's only one way to go. It's up. And even if your verbal were to go down slightly, hopefully not too much, you need to get that quant up. That 50th percentile is a big red flag.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's see what else we have here. Does the adcom do online profiling of applicants? I'm assuming the question is, does the adline, like Google applicants, is what you're really meaning there. They might, is the answer. It's not unusual. Doesn't happen all the time, but I've seen studies where a significant percentage of times schools will Google applicants. So if that's what you mean by profiling, online profiling, make sure your online profile reflects you in a positive light. Okay, they can definitely Google you. All right, here's an interesting one.
Can I say something about that, Lynn?
Of course, anytime. Jump in anytime.
I usually tell my clients before they apply or shortly after they apply, to go over their Facebook page and just make sure they delete anything they don't want the outcomes to see. To make sure that anything that they want them to be kept private is private, and also to update, because by then they would have, a very nice updated copy of the resume to update their LinkedIn profile, because
Excellent
more
suggestion.
outcomes will be going in there, so you want that profile to be, ready for business school as well, even though it's not a requirement in the application itself. You want that to be, if you don't have a picture, put a profile picture there. You want to be as professional and as updated as everything else. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Excellent suggestion. Karen, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I agree.
Okay. How can early career students impress adcoms of strong MBA programs such as HBS 2+2 or Yale Silver Scholars? And these are both pre-experience programs. Karen, you want to take that one?
I'll pass that to you because I haven't dealt with that.
Okay. Karen, by the way, was the career manager at Cornell University and at Cornell Johnson School for many years. And Esmeralda was an admissions director at Yale School of Management, and also and she was the director at the Michigan State Broad School of Management. Beginning back to the early career programs, 2+2 and Yale Silver Scholars, what you need to do is have really good internships in terms of experience. You also would want to have some leadership roles usually on-campus organizations, be able to show impact in those roles. Obviously high grades, high test scores, those programs are really for the exceptional. Does that answer your question, Ahmad?
Linda?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say a lot of people have really high grades and good GMAT. Mm-hmm. So for the kind of program you're talking about, I think the outstanding leadership or accomplishments will be really important. And this is beyond the norm. This is the kind of person who everyone's afraid of when they're applying to B school, that's going to be who they're competing against. For these programs, I think that's what they're looking for.
I agree with you. Right. Yeah, well said. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Any advice for a candidate who has 2 to 3 years before applying and is in employment phase so he can present himself more effectively? This is from Sarvish, and I assume that means that you're not applying for at least 2 to 3 years and you're working currently. All right, I have a little bit of advice. One, assume as many leadership roles as you can. Now I realize you're a junior person on the totem pole at the moment, but when you can assume leadership role, seize the opportunity. Also, take advantage for any kind of international exposure that you possibly can, either in terms of personal travel or in terms of job opportunities if things open up in your company. Finally, not say finally, but next thing that comes to mind, since you probably are junior in your company and you probably don't have a lot of leadership opportunities, look for leadership opportunities and opportunities to make a difference off the job in volunteer commitments. Make time for volunteer commitments. Make time for other interests. Those are all things that schools want to see. And finally, if you were not happy with your grades, try and take some classes now or get one of the certificates that I mentioned so that you can show that you do know how to apply yourself academically, and then prepare for the GMAT in such a time and way where you ace it the first time and only have to take it once. Anything else, Esmeralda or Karen?
I would add.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
I would add for within your company, if there's any way to join an ad hoc committee or to let your boss know you'd really like to be involved in any projects that are going on that might not be specifically within your purview, anything to give you more exposure. Let the higher ups know that you're really trying to gain more experience.
Great. Esmeralda, what would you want to say?
This case reminds me of a client that I had in the summer, and then she was in exactly the same situation, and she was actually ticking all the boxes, saying exactly what you guys said, and she asked me what else. And the one thing I said, well, since you're doing everything else, I would say try to excel at your job.
Of course.
Because you want your bosses to write a stunning letter of recommendation in 2-3 years. So try to excel at what you do. Whatever you do, try to do the best that you can do. Don't do a mediocre job ever. Always try to do that, and that's what I'm hoping she's doing.
Great advice. We also have, I don't know if Rachel, you're posting it now? Okay, we also have a report for people 4 or 5 years away from applying. And Rachel's going to post it now. Again, you can download it after the webinar. Let me see if she already did. Yep. Prep for B-School, 4-year guide to college students and recent grads. So she'll post the URL. Oh, she just did. URL for that. You may want to download that after the webinar. Okay, let's see. Okay, Jack asks, GMAT first is a 680, low quant, second is 710, all areas better, second time around, worth it to submit both to show the uptick? That's a good question. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've kind of been going around and around on that one. My sense, well, this was kind of funny. When the whole score cancel thing came out, I assume you've canceled it, and the question is really, do you reinstate both or reinstate just the higher one? We were discussing it internally. Every single former admissions committee member on my staff said, just show the higher one, because they're going to wonder which is the real you. When I've talked to current admissions directors, they waffle a little bit more. They just say it doesn't matter, or show both, or show, yeah. So Esmeralda, do you want to respond to that? Do you want to comment?
Yeah, I'm one of the ones that told you that they should only show the highest.
Yeah, I know.
Just because that's the one, you don't want them to, even think about the lower one. Just think about the higher one, and but again, it is something that there is a lot of difference between, among schools. Every school is a little bit different. I would actually say you could always contact the school you're applying to, and without even saying your name, and say the situation, what would you like me to do, and see what they say, and see what answer they come up. In my opinion, I would just show the highest one, but that's just me.
Okay. how about, Sachin is asking, how about executive MBA profile, experience, GMAT score, leadership experience? How much different is it than the regular MBA? Well, one difference there is the GPA tends to be less important. In general, the academic profile is slightly less important. They want some evidence you can do the work still, but they probably will look much more at your experience than your GPA, which is from years ago, or the GMAT score, which is apparently just less predictive the older you get. Some MBA programs, and GMAC actually has come out with a different test for executives. So the academic portion of the 5 things, I think, is a little less emphasized on the executive level. Esmeralda or Karen, do you want to add anything to that first?
I would just say you need to be very clear as to why you're getting an executive MBA, that it's not just because you're bored with your current role and have nothing else to do, so you decided to go to business school, but rather, how will you use this degree to advance your career? What difference will it make for you in your career? And that's probably the most important thing to show.
Esmeralda, do you want anything?
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think that also, I mean, this part, although the academic part is has a little bit of a less weight, as you said, Linda, but the work experience would have more weight. And
right.
So here you would want to show that you really have had positions of leadership, have managed people, large budgets, etc., in order to be, competitive for a top executive MBA program.
Right. And the other thing I wanted to add is another element with the executive MBA program is that it's part-time. You're going to be working full-time while pursuing the executive MBA. And many, many, many programs will want to see that you have that you're very realistic about the demands of the program in terms of working full-time, going to school part-time. You have a family. Many people in the executive MBA programs at this point do have family and children. So many will also ask you, how are you going to handle it time-wise? And you have to be able to show, again, a realistic plan. So that's another element that's different from the full-time MBA. Now, Ahmed asks, is there any way prospective candidates can get a valuable review like Joe? Remember, Joe was interested in our services. So if you are interested in our services, and I mean that sincerely, then you pay for it basically, and you can get the review. That's how you get a review. Let's see. And actually, the best way, you now have the $100 off. That's how you get your review. Order an hour of consulting, and you can get a better review actually, as opposed to just a quick phone call. A thorough review for only $200. Let's see. Okay, so I did that one. Let's see. We're going a little over. Should I continue? Raise your hand if you want me to continue. Okay, yeah. All right, then I'll continue a little longer. Esmeralda and Karen, if you can hang on a little while longer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Nigat is asking if you can buy the soft copy of the book. Is a soft copy available for a sale? Yes, it definitely is. You can get it on Amazon. I'm not quite sure where you're located. Any of the Amazon stores has it. It's also available, as I mentioned, from Flipkart. So that was easy. Thank you for the question. Let's see. Oh, this is a good question. Is there a particular number of schools that you should focus on? I haven't looked at any applications yet, but are you supposed to list other schools that you've applied for, and can that play a role in the decision for a particular committee? So those are two questions here. Is there any number of schools that's ideal to apply to? And then how is information about other schools that you're applying to used? Tell you what, Esmeralda, you want to start with that one?
Well, in terms of a particular list of number of schools, well, I had clients that have applied from, 2 schools to 10 schools. So, and everywhere in between. I would say Usually between 4 and 6 is usually the average. You want to have one or two schools that you really want to target. A couple of more realistic choices where your profile fits right in, and then maybe a safety school where you're a little bit above the average, just so that you have an admissions officer at the end of the day. So that would be my advice. And what was the next question, Linda?
The next question is, how, if you're asked to list the other schools that you've applied to, can that play a part in the decision for a particular committee?
Yeah, that's tricky. That a lot of schools ask for this question now. Yeah. And I mean, you have to tell them. Usually they do this as a benchmarking purposes. They want to know who their competitors are, and rarely it plays a part in terms of their decision. It's not like you're going to have a disadvantage. It's usually for the schools in general purposes, even though I don't like it, and I remember not taking it. I remember taking it out of the application when I was an admissions director. It's pretty much, I felt that it was putting the applicant on the spot. But they do it, most of the times they do it is for benchmarking purposes. Right. I don't know if Anna wants to add anything to that.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with Esmeralda. Most of the time it's for benchmarking purposes. And whenever I've asked admissions directors about it, they all say it has no impact or bearing on their final decision. Obviously they see it if they think that, if they see that they might end up wondering sometimes, why are you applying to that school or why are you applying to our school, if they see your list. But overall, they say it doesn't have any bearing. Okay. In terms of the number of schools, I agree with Esmeralda. I would say 4 to 6 is probably the average, but I also think the ideal number really varies. Are you reaching? Are you stretching a lot? Then I think you need to apply to more programs with at least 1 or 2 where you're likely to get in. If you are limited geographically, obviously that will limit the number of schools that you apply to. So there can be lots of different reasons. If you're applying round 1, then you can also choose to apply to, let's say, 4 schools round 1, where you may be stretching a little more, and then apply a little bit more conservatively round 2. So you have different options, and that is something that I can't really give you a number and say this is the ideal number, because it really depends on personal circumstances. I would say that unless you say, look, this year I'm going to apply only to reach schools or only to stretch schools, and if I don't get in, then I'm going to apply more realistically next year, then if you really want to get in and go in the fall, then you have to make sure you're applying to some schools where you are highly competitive. Okay, whether you call them safeties or highly competitive, I don't really care, but otherwise you're aiming for disappointment. Okay, let's see. We got some other interesting questions here. Oh, this is really nice. Thank you, Jack. Okay, I'll share this with you. Thank you so much for taking the extra time. You really know your stuff and present it in a really digestible and executable framework. Cheers. Thank you. Okay, let me get back to questions now that I've patted myself on the back. All right. Casey asks, can you talk about the evening and weekend MBA application process? How does it differ from the full-time MBA application? I think it's more important for the full-time MBA to get your application in as early as possible. And while it certainly doesn't hurt in the evening and weekend MBA application process, and probably would be helpful there too, I don't think it's quite as important. Again, like with the executive MBA, I think the weekend and MBA programs want to know that you are realistic about the demands of working full-time and going to school part-time. So you have to be prepared to address that question. They want to know that you are committed to the weekend and evening option and are not just kind of trying to get in a full-time program through the back door. It's another thing that sometimes people try. They don't like that particularly. And usually the stats are a little lower for those programs, but that you need to just look up and check out. Anything to add? Esmeralda and Karen?
I agree with you. It is exactly like you said, yeah.
Okay. Let's see what else we have. let's see. And then some schools, Mansi asks, some schools take the GRE and GMAT. Is one preferred over the other? Okay, officially for most schools they have no preference. Some schools will say we have a slight preference for the GMAT, but we take the GRE. I think for you as an applicant, any school that allows you to take both, you really have to look and determine which is the one you're going to do better on. That's my advice. So, go from there. Okay? Esmeralda or Karen, do you want to, you agree? Disagree?
That's why I usually tell my clients, you want to be, just choose the one where you think you can do better off. Some people find the GRE a little bit easier on the quant.
Yeah.
And then some people actually don't, so you might want to, take a practice test on either if you're really unsure and then see. But if you think you can, the one thing that you have to consider is that the GMAT is taken into consideration for the ranking. So if you really are good, naturally good standardized test taker, and you think you can ace the GMAT, you might be better off with that one because that would be another point, another plus in your application. Well, the GRE is not necessarily taken for the rankings, at least for now. That would be my advice, But you can always, see wherever you can get higher score.
I do think that there's been movement over the last few years where more schools are equally accepting of both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think they're getting used to it, more and more used to it.
Mm-hmm.
I also think, this is my personal opinion, I've never seen it anywhere. I mean, I might have seen it, I think I've been quoted, but I've never seen anybody official saying this. I think if somebody is struggling with a test score and their grades are good and their work experience is good, I think they're better off applying with the GRE than the GMAT. That's one thing I'll say. Then you still have to show you can do the work, don't misunderstand me. But the GMAT has taken on functions that it was never intended to fulfill. It's used as a screening tool by certain management consulting companies and investment banks. It is looked at by both applicants, students, recruiters, alumni as some kind of measure of applicant quality and the competitiveness of the school. And therefore, schools are reluctant to admit applicants with lower GMATs because their GMAT average is going to take a hit. So any student that is admitted with below average GMAT scores, and I don't mean 2 points, 5, 10 points below average or whatever it is, I mean the ones that are more significantly below average, that student has to be really stellar in other ways. Esmeralda, Karen, what do you think about that?
I agree. I absolutely agree. Yeah, whether we like it or not, the GMAT has taken that turn, and I think that you're better off, with the GRE in that case.
Okay. Casey, who unfortunately has left, asked another really good question, and that is, how important are extracurricular activities such as volunteer work? They are important. Karen, do you want to comment on that from a career perspective also, not just an admissions perspective?
I think volunteer activities are important, contributing to your community are important, but only if they're authentic, only if they're activities that you truly were involved in, truly took a leadership role in, that it was something you were passionate about. If you're just listing activities to list activities, they will eventually see through that, especially if you have an interview. So I think it does show well-roundedness, especially if you're, let's say, in an area like finance, if you've done some volunteer work that's totally, in a nonprofit setting. It shows you have interest beyond your job, and so that can be good, but only if you really were involved with it.
Right. Esmeralda, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, and helping on what Karen said, then you want to choose an activity where you are really passionate about. So there is not like one single nonprofit or a single organization where you should volunteer, for example. But you really want to be genuine. You really want to volunteer for the organization where you really really like to volunteer. I mean, I've had clients who spend the Saturdays cleaning the beaches of Peru, for example, and that they really are, very passionate about, the environment and about this sort of things. So that's what they are doing, and that's what they're putting the heart of, and they can write beautiful essays about that. But what I would say is that you want to choose what you're most interested in and passionate about, so that it comes through what Karen said about being genuine.
And don't, absolutely include things like classical ballet, or
absolutely,
you play in a band. Anything where you're showing who you are as a person and what kinds of things interest you are all legitimate and should be included.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And this kind of also gets back to the standout part of the, the points I was making earlier. If all you do is work, you're not going to stand out. So having a volunteer commitment or an interesting a hobby gives you a multidimensionality. And many volunteer commitments allow you to take a leadership role and assume responsibilities that you just cannot do at this point, this stage of your careers. So I think they're really, really important, is what I think we're all three saying. All right.
And Linda, I would like to just add one thing we have not talked about at all.
Okay.
One way to show that you fit in and stand out is to really get to know the school, and to do that by reaching out to current students or alumni of the school. And it's
Excellent.
Not always easy to get those names or that contact information, but you can use alumni network from your undergrad institution. You can ask the admissions office if there's a list of current students who would be willing to talk with you, because it shows that you're truly interested, that you've taken time, that you're reaching out with others, you're building a network, and you're really going to uncover information that you will not find on the website.
Right. It also shows initiative.
Mm-hmm.
Which is one of those qualities that all schools value. Now, one other way to do so, by the way, is if you look up some clubs that you're interested in. Some of you mentioned you're interested in management consulting. Almost all schools have a consulting club. Frequently, the email addresses for the officers in the club are listed on the website. Or there might be a luxury goods club or a consumer goods club, or whatever your interests are, a wine club if you're interested in wine. Various ethnic groups and religious groups frequently have clubs on business school campuses. Again, reach out to those clubs where you share interests, and see if you can talk to some of the current students or correspond with some of the current students. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to take one more question, and then I think we're going to call it a day. Actually, I don't think I'm going to take one more question. So with that, many of you are sending in your thank yous, and you're almost welcome. Thank you to Esmeralda and to Karen for joining me. One last time, and again, for those of you sending in the thank yous, you're very, very welcome. Just one more reminder about the MBA Love coupon code, $100 off any of our services. An excellent way for you to get a profile evaluation, a thorough profile evaluation, is to purchase 1 hour of admissions consulting, or to get a review of an application essay if you're applying now. Again, MBA Love, good today. And with that, I want to thank you so much. You've been a marvelous audience. I appreciate your participation, your questions, your answers. Thank you to Esmeralda Cardinal and Karen Ash for their participation also. And good luck with all your applications. Take care.